I know, as it is, I'm already the anti-Cupid by saying, run away from too much romance, run away from charisma. But even I can't say, oh, if someone is saying something nice to you, then run away. I'm not going to say it, it's not true. So there's only so tight that red flag radar can be. What is seductive to you? What attracts us to a new person? What's the most attractive trait to you when you meet someone, draws you to them? Beautiful face, attractive physique, the way a person dresses, the way a person smells, what a person does for a living, the kind of stuff a person knows. But one of the most compelling of all, which I actually have no doubt that many of you wrote, someone who makes you laugh. Laughter changes us when it's really deeply felt laughter. Laughter changes us, even at the level of our central nervous system. It feels so good, so we want more. If someone makes us laugh, it may even make up a lot of ground, even if we aren't really physically attracted to them or they have other attributes that we're not necessarily drawn to. We associate a person who makes us laugh. We associate laughter with joy. We're smiling, we're anticipating, we're smiling, we're laughing, we're anticipating more laughter when we see them. It is actually the foundation of many a relationship, and many relationships last because of the laughter. And if it is that seductive, it's easy to see how laughter may be a pretty big part of love bombing, and even more exciting than a bunch of flowers or a fancy night out. So as you can imagine, all of that laughter is something we want to keep in our lives. So we may start overlooking red flags if we are laughing. You may even think, this person is, I don't know, you're talking to someone who manipulates and gaslights and is angry or is sullen at times, or they're late. They make digs about my appearance. They don't like my friends. Pick your red flags from the menu. But you might think, damn, this person makes me laugh. So you hang in there. The laughter can be that seductive. We don't think of laughter as a key element of love bombing, but we should. We often focus on the more superficial stuff, like stuff, gifts or experiences or fairy tale stuff or things moving fast or good sex. Laughter feels like a good thing, a good sense of humor. That's not superficial, right? Good sense of humor, well, that's a healthy thing to want. And frankly, it kind of is. And by the way, there's nothing inherently toxic about getting gifts or flowers or extravagant expenses or spending lots of time together. It's the degree to which those things are coming at you in a way that they're blocking you from seeing a situation clearly. That is what makes love bombing tricky. It's not what it is, it's what it blocks and how it drives the cognitive dissonance. When something feels good, like laughter, we want it to last forever. So it is so easy in the midst of that hilarity that the red flags are going to get justified. Oh, they don't mean it. That's just their sense of humor. Or, I need to develop a thicker skin. I'm too angry. I need to laugh with them more. I'm asking too much. They have a demanding job. That's why they're late. They're just joking. And my friends can be a handful. You know the justifications we make to make these relationships last. And we also, because we want to make the laughter last. Another challenge with those funny folks is that sometimes if they are antagonistic or narcissistic, there will be as many barbs embedded in those jokes as genuinely funny jokes. As a result, you may find yourself laughing about something funny, and then they make a dig, and you're still sort of ha-ha laughing, but it's still a joke, right? It's like one of those ha-ha laughs. And since you were just laughing, they will just try to pawn it off as, oh, come on, you know me, I'm just a joker. And that's how they sneak in those hurtful comments. So these comic dates, can be a mix of merriment and masochism. I love laughing, and I love making people laugh. But humor as cruelty, or a dig, or a passive-aggressive barb, not good. And laughter is so seductive that we may find ourselves fighting for it. Listen, I don't mean for you to be suspicious of a new date or a new person who makes you laugh. I'm just saying that don't let those tears streaming down your face from laughter block you from seeing red flags, because that would not be funny. Our sort of trope, our standard take on love bombing is dinners out and trips and flowers and gifts. It's also very gendered. A narcissistic man with cash wines and dines someone. But it's very dangerous to use that one-dimensional prototypical take on love bombing, because then there's a risk you'll miss it. A person with not much money can love bomb you, and you may not even recognize it, because you may think, oh, well, this person isn't hitting me up with lots of fancy dinners and gifts. It's not just that. Love bombing is a phase of idealization and seduction. It's a time, typically, when a person is meeting someone new and getting to know them. In order to understand love bombing, we also need to understand our love bombability. Despite the narcissistic person's scarce empathy and their disinterest once you finally are really together, one gift of narcissistic people is that they're able to read people, and more specifically, what other people want and need. It's why they're often such good salespeople. And that's a big part of what's happening in the love bombing phase. They are figuring out what to give you, what to do to draw you in. The gifts, dinners, travel, love bombing trope gets so much attention because it's very visible. It plays into existing narratives about BS fairy tales. It's what we see in the movies, and more it's the nonsense we see about people on Instagram and their relationships. It works if the person with all the money and all the stuff finds a person who would be affected by that and enjoy it. But a narcissistic love bomber can also figure out if it's something else. A narcissistic person may figure out that your bombability is around emotional sharing. So they may share lots of feelings with you. They may find out that your thing is charitable endeavors and giving back. And so they might claim to be a donor to this or that, or actually get involved in that. It may be your thing may be around family, and they may talk about their close-knit family. The things they're saying to you may not even be true. But by saying these things, they can find that way in. Another way that love bombing works is by sheer intensity. Lots of people out there, particularly people with narcissistic parents, were not adequately seen in childhood. So when someone pays attention, it may get your notice, especially if you are attracted to them or interested in them. So they may be on it. And I don't mean in a creepy stalker, I'm going to send you 50 messages and get angry if you don't respond kind of way, but they're on it in the way of the good mornings, the good nights, the how's your day, the thinking of you, the picture of something they're doing or something they saw, or sharing pictures from the day before when you were together. You don't need money to do that. And since it's so performative, they can just do it for a little while to win you over, because it is quite seductive. And that intensity is often the most compelling part of love bombing. And obviously, yeah, sometimes it gets coupled with spendy stuff like gifts and meals and stuff, but sometimes it's just the intensity. You may also be someone who has said to yourself, I'm going to steer clear of the love bombers. I am not going to fall for it. If someone wants to take me out fancy, I'm ahead of them. Instead, you might think, oh, well, if someone is doing something more simple, like a little picnic, or taking me to a food truck, or picking some flowers by the side of the road, or making me a simple dinner at home, well, Those may not seem like grandiose gestures, so they may not clock in as traditionally love-bomby. But if those simple gestures speak to you, and that's also coupled with that interest and that intense focus, it's love-bombing. People who don't have money, narcissistic people without money, can also sell us the story we want to hear. You may care about animals, so they share the dog pictures. You may care about family. Again, they'll tell you about their big family, show you pictures. You may care about travel, and they may say, once I have more money, I want to go here and there and everywhere. Doesn't mean they had to have done it, but it's still appealing. I'm always very careful to say that we are not silly or foolish for being love-bombed. Any of us will blossom under attention. That said, what we need to do in our process of knowing ourselves is to know ourselves, to know what grabs our attention, what's compelling, what plays on our old narratives, and even on our trauma-bonded stories, to know what may undercut our critical thinking because it speaks to what we want. A person, for example, who is a single parent and has been having trouble dating may be more vulnerable to a new person who tells them that they're a single parent too, or that they really respect single parents and that this isn't an issue for them. Love bombing in that way can be about correction, and you don't need money to do that. So no, love bombing ain't just a rich person's game. And while we are on this, remember, women can be narcissistic and can love bomb too. Again, we often use a very gendered telling of this story, but I've had some people ask me about this who have said, yo, I was love bombed by a woman. There's no reason it can't be dinners out and gifts or intense attention or simple dinner at home. Gender doesn't matter. Anybody can love bomb. It's important that we don't let the stereotypes get us off our game and think that, well, this person isn't wealthy, this person doesn't have anything, so it can't be love bombing. The hell it can. If anything, it may even foster a greater vulnerability because there may be a greater likelihood of justification, and for that narcissistic love bomber sort of playing on pity and guilt in you and maybe other manipulations. Vulnerable narcissistic people are a great example of this and are often so victimized and so failure to launchy that people will recall getting lost in this new person's sad story. Then your empathy can become targeted, and then you may feel drawn to their hard luck story and want to rescue them. Love bombing is an equal opportunity experience. What's crucial is that we know ourselves and that we understand the things that pull on our hearts. And if it isn't too extravagant, it can be easier to not register it. And let's talk about why love bombing gets really confusing depending on those damned love languages. Somebody sent me in a question about this specific issue, and their question was, could love bombing be misinterpreted as acts of service? Thought it was a really interesting question. They sent it in a while ago, and I pondered it for a while. So in case there are some of you out there who don't know about the love languages, I never want to assume everybody knows these sort of little things. I know this one's a pretty universal one, but just in case, they're sort of meant to be this sort of framework for what it is that we as individuals need in a relationship and how we also, the form in which we give love to others in a relationship. Where it gets complicated is when we get into a relationship with someone whose love language is very different from ours. Now, again, if you don't know, the different love languages are physical touch, quality time, words of affirmation, gift giving, and acts of service. So this person's really specifically focused on the acts of service one, right? Now, acts of service means showing or wanting to receive love through these alleged acts of service, which could be someone doing the dishes, or building a bookshelf, or doing the taxes, or folding the laundry, or driving you to the airport. Those gestures either are the way of showing love or wanting to receive love. And if that is your love language, when someone does those acts of service for you, According to this model, it could be quite spellbinding. And I've talked about this before. I've taken this love language test. There wasn't even a close second for me. I'm acts of service all day. Put out my trash cans and I will think I was hit by Cupid's arrow. And my idea of giving a holiday gift for someone is like getting their car washed or their closet organized. And if somebody wanted to do those things for me, best present ever. I thought the question was an interesting one because love bombing is obviously going to be more powerful if it intersects with your alleged love language. If, for example, your love language was quality time, a love bomber who spends lots of time with you, talking with you, hanging out with you, that's going to be more bomby. That's going to be more seductive. If you're a physical touch person, touchy, huggy, sensual, sexual love bombing, that may really hook you. But let's go back to those acts of service, what this person's asking about. Could it be that during the love bombing phase, that the love bomber was doing stuff for you? And instead of that, you seeing that as love bombing, that you may have experienced it as acts of service. Maybe they did things, like I said, pick you up from the airport or help you fix things in your house or go with you to the store to run a complicated errand or watch your dog when you're out of town. The tricky bit about love bombing is that it is sometimes hard to discern from just someone who is really into you. So, and if your groove is acts of service and early in the relationship, this person is doing stuff for you, lots of stuff that could be experienced as merely acts of service, it's understandable why you would think you've hit the relationship lottery. Now, what you got to remember is love bombing is not just as simple as the behaviors that happen in these relationships. Love bombing is part of sort of an overall attitude and process. It can, now, in general, love bombing sort of feels like a lot, like it's intense. But this question was a very good one, because if a love bomber does stuff that feels very helpful, honestly, it would be all but impossible to tell where the acts of service end and where the love bombing begins. You would have to literally keep an eagle eye out for other patterns. Are they controlling in how they approach the acts of service? Are they telling you that you're doing things wrong? That they telling you that they know how to do these things better than you? Or they're very, very insistent. And you may say like, hey, I can do this myself. And then they may seem to imply that they have to be the one to do it. And you may think, damn, I have always wanted someone to come along and be an acts of service person. And here is this person doing all of this stuff for me. So maybe I shouldn't get caught up in how intense they're being. You may justify or sort of push away some of that intense stuff because they're doing the thing you really appreciate, which is those acts of service. The beginning of a relationship is hard enough without also having to become a love bomb detector. And if you have the unique bad luck of the narcissistic love bomber just happening to love bomb exactly the way your love language works, and even if you don't believe in the love bomb, if you don't believe in love languages, I get that, just simply to do what you value in a relationship, I hate to say it, but it's a pretty good bet that you're probably not going to pick up on it as being a love bomb. In fact, if the person's approach is not in sync with your love language, so for example, if they're more of a gift giver and you're more of an acts of service person, then their love bombing may seem interesting and compelling, but not bewitching in the way that a love bombing experience that lines up with what matters to you can feel like. Listen, I have heard tales of people being love bombed by someone who showed up and helped them get like 10 years of projects done and stuff done in a matter of months, or was willing to do the driving and the pickups and the helpful behaviors to them that meant to the world to them. And then that signified love. So they got really stuck. I have to say, this is one of those videos where I don't have any great answers, but maybe some awareness. If anything, it's meant to be one that asks you to show more grace to yourself when you say, oh, how did I fall for the love bombing? Love means different things to us beyond the emotional connection, empathy, and compassion. It can also be folded laundry or an airport pickup at rush hour. It can mean that the love bombing that hit your love language was an explosion that you were not going to be able to easily avoid and step back from. And it was a moment, it can feel like a moment of being seen that can sweep you away like no other. It's tricky. These relationships are easy to get into. I guess you got a 1 in 5 chance that they're going to hit you on that one love languagey thing that matters to you. And that can take that love bombing and make it profound. But it's very easy to see how the doing that happens early in a relationship could be interpreted as acts of service and be missed as the love bombing experience that it really is. So let's talk about psychological catfishing, because this has a lot of bearing on narcissistic relationships. Now, it just dawned on me that something that narcissistic folks do is that they are, in a way, what we could call psychological catfishers. Now, I am older, so when the show Catfish and the term catfishing came out, I didn't know what the hell it was. And for those of you who aren't up on these terms, catfishing means to entice someone into a relationship by creating sort of a false social media, or I guess an online dating profile. And then when the person who's pulled into that profile actually meets the catfisher in real life or on a video chat, they see that that person is not at all who they present themselves to be. And by and large, the term catfishing then is focused on sort of misrepresenting your appearance, your gender, or things like a job. So a person will put up attractive photos that are not them, or claim to be a gender they are not. So an example would be a person will pretend to be a young, attractive woman using false images. And then when they actually turn up, they turn out to be an old man. The catfisher is the one who puts out the false identity. The catfish is the person who falls for it. I hope that makes sense, because I actually had to do some research to figure that out myself. But basically the portrayal of something false to draw someone in and then switching it up psychologically definitely felt like something narcissists do. So online spaces really provide a home field advantage for narcissistic folks because they spend a lot of time in them. They are rather superficial spaces, and narcissistic people are really good at putting out a sort of a false self. And in the case of catfishing, it's based on a false self. Catfishing, as I said, seems to focus on clear, identifiable issues: job, appearance, gender, race, age, that kind of thing. But couldn't we make the argument that something that narcissistic folks do, because the premise of catfishing is that you are trying to draw someone in and I guess get the sadistic glee of playing them, but that something that narcissistics do is draw people in on online spaces. And while the narcissistic person may not shift their identity, so in other words, the narcissist could use their real pictures, their real-ish age, their actual job, though they may sort of grandiosely fluff their job up, but then the real town that they live in. But instead, what the narcissist may do is put out a false psychology of being chill and nice and respectful and kind and easygoing. So let's say you do follow and start messaging with someone who is narcissistic. Their profile may seem attractive and compelling. And remember, narcissistic people are much better at social media and online dating than most people because they're so good at impression management. But the part they may draw you in is someone who seems to be a good listener, who is able to be empathic, may seem well-regulated, give thoughtful advice, be vulnerable, all of which feels like the opposite of narcissism. So you may have lots of virtual backing and forthing, writing, texting, DMing. It may even escalate to a video call. Now remember, this isn't a traditional catfish. So the gender of this person is right. Their pictures are real. Their background may line up with their pictures online. But in your little calls, they may still be showing empathy, niceness, regulation, warmth, and humility. So you bite. And the this is a narcissistic person, so maybe there is some love bombing. But the fact is, based on the online interaction, the stuff we know that makes a relationship healthy, like respect, compassion, kindness, mutuality, reciprocity, they are all there. So you think, well, what's a little love bombing? This seems like a healthy person. And in the weeks before that, online, they also, in all their messages, seem to have the goods of what makes a relationship good and healthy. Now, maybe some red flags start to pop up, but you ignore them because they showed you what they were online, right? And it was good, and it wasn't a catfish. The pictures were real. They live where they say they live. They work where they say they work. They look like their pictures. I think that a psychological catfish is much more dangerous. If someone says that they are a 22-year-old woman and what shows up is a 65-year-old guy, that's an instant reveal, and you feel angry and foolish, and that is that. If someone says they are respectful and really interested in you and your life, and they give you good advice or support, and then within a month or so in real life, they're revealing themselves to be a gaslighting, manipulative, dysregulated person, you may wonder, what is this? In the case of psychological catfishing, the reveal is slow, so the dissonance and justification kick in. You think, I want the online person. Well, so did the person who thought they were texting with a 25-year-old hottie. They just got the reveal faster. Now, I remember watching 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days, and do not judge me, my days are very long. And one of the stories was a sweet woman who was widowed and had really nice grown kids. And she fell for the weird, sexy pictures of some muscle guy, and she did lots of messaging with him, and she fell for the romance, and she felt loved and attractive, and it seems like she found her sexual drive again. And then she started to try to set up a real-life meetup. And after months of this, had never video called him, only audio called. So when the time came to set up a real visit, things obviously fell apart, and she found out that obviously he didn't exist and was calling from somewhere else than he claimed to live. And then her children did a reverse image search. I am not sure why they did not think of that initially. And they found out that basically the pictures were stock images of basic sexy guy. As I watched the show, I felt such an empathy for her. It was clear that this woman just wanted a love story and maybe even a fairy tale. But she went for someone kind of sleazy, but obviously he was attractive to her. And so she overlooked all of the red flags of the virtual relationship, the no video calls and all of that, because she wanted this relationship to work. I shudder to think about what would have happened to it if her children had not stepped in and revealed the whole thing to be the fraud, and she actually went ahead and showed up to the place. She actually didn't fall for the financial shakedown that was obviously coming, but the whole thing was sort of sad, right? Let's face it, sane is a good look. Sane, empathic, caring, and when we get those things and a pretty face to look at, well, that feels like jackpot. So when narcissistic folks do this sort of psychological catfish, it shows that they do know what people want. They know that being caring and sweet and kind and listening is what people want. So they can fake it for a catfishing minute and then boom. Because more and more relationships these days are starting online, psychological catfishing may be the new normal. And once you get past the pictures and the superficial fluff, and when they do video chat you and you see they are who they say they are, it can be easy to think, yay, they are who they say they are. They know how to fake what looks good, but that healthy stuff, it's effortful for them. And once they have you, they aren't going to keep breaking a sweat and doing the whole fake respect and compassion thing. Love bombing is a sprint, a short period of time when they can put on a show long enough to get you. Personally, I think psychological catfishing is worse than just regular catfishing because it isn't clear the first time they walk in the door. It takes a minute for you to see that you were played. When a person who doesn't look like the pictures walks in, that's easy. When a person who looks like the pictures and for a minute acts like their messages and their video chats and then comes into your life, and then after a few months switches it up. In essence, they drew you in with a false empathic self. To me, that feels like a much worse betrayal. And many folks who are in relationships with narcissistic people do feel that they were duped. If your relationship started in an online space, you may very well feel catfished. And as much as catfishing is a trope and we're tempted to make fun of folks in these relationships, we need to stop, because this was real to them and they felt foolish and betrayed and hurt. And when we make fun of catfished people, because we all think we're so smart that we wouldn't fall for it, to be careful. Some of you may think, well, what's the difference between a psychological catfish and a bait and switch? Maybe nothing, but there is something unique about the online space because it is not happening in real time. The narcissistic person can take a minute and give the responses they know will win someone over. Whether it's a catfish or a bait and switch, to me, it's all the same. We get hundreds of emails from good people, smart people, loving people, empathic people who all got duped. Most of you who watch this channel likely got played in some way in a narcissistic relationship. It's why you're watching. This didn't happen because you're foolish. It happened because you're a decent human being. The betrayal of really thinking that you clearly saw someone and then having them do that bait and switch, it's an awful feeling. And remember, the responsibility of that is on the bait and switcher, on the catfisher, not on the person being catfished. Let's stop humiliating the people who fall for it and see the psychological hustlers for what they are. And most of the time, they are narcissists. So you're in a narcissistic relationship, and when that relationship turns dark, and it always turns dark, and you see it for the invalidating mess it was, many survivors I've talked to have said, I kind of feel gross or bad. Like, I enjoyed the love bombing part. Not even that people were like, ooh, I love the gifts and I love the fancy stuff, but they loved the sense, all of us love that sense of being desired. Now, desiring other people is something that narcissistic folks do better than anyone. When they aren't making you feel bad, they can make you feel really good. Saying things like, you're so special, you're the most beautiful person in the world, I'm so lucky to be walking down the street with you, you're so cool, you're so awesome. And they cement it just as you're finding yourself getting so lost in the haze of how good it all feels, feeling so attractive, feeling so desirable. They pull back. And now you're craving this desire. You'll have anything to get it back. So then you put up with more and more of their bad behavior. And you see that cycle, right? So when people look back at the relationship and they're asked, how did you find yourself drawn into this mess in the first place? This person's a jerk. What attracted you to them? Why did you keep it going when the red flags were popping up? You know all the survivor questions. Many survivors will say, or won't say, and they'll feel guilty or ashamed about it, but they'll say, it felt good. But again, and then feel guilty or ashamed for that. But it's true. The self-shaming and the guilt for being a human being is a big part of the challenges of survivorship from these relationships. I've yet to meet the person who doesn't like to be complimented or to be with someone who leaves them feeling attractive and desirable. That's human. And for people with trauma-bonded histories, the idea that someone could be all in with them and then at times disappear or be invalidating is actually the roadmap for love that many of us received early in our lives. Most survivors of narcissistic relationships have trained themselves to subsist on emotional breadcrumbs for a long time, like emotional camels in a way. Now, the dynamic can be greatly magnified if the narcissistic person you were involved with gets involved in something more scandalous. They break the law, they harm someone else, they behave badly in a job. Because then people are even looking at you more sideways, thinking like, why were you with this person who does these bad things? Survivors will even question it for themselves and will look back at the beginning when the narcissistic person did leave them feeling special and attractive, beautiful, chosen. And then that can really leave survivors feeling foolish for falling for a con. But it was real to you, and that makes it real. I have to remind all of you that no matter how much you may know about narcissism or even psychopathy, you still get played even with that information. Because if our red flag radar was that sensitive, we would never get much past hello with a lot of people. And we aren't robots. We bring our own vulnerabilities in, our sense of not being good enough, our anxiety about reading a social situation accurately, our fears, our histories. And so with all of that, if someone is being complimentary and sort of seemingly swept away by us, I know, as it is, I'm already the anti-Cupid by saying, run away from too much romance, run away from charisma. But even I can't say, oh, if someone is saying something nice to you, then run away. I'm not going to say it's not true. So there's only so tight that red flag radar can be. All of us deserve to be seen and loved and cherished and desired at some point in our lives. And unfortunately, not enough of us are. So when narcissists hand out desire, it's like them passing out bottles of ice water in the desert. We want it, we need it, so we take it, and wanting that and getting swept away with that, that's human. Many times when I've worked with clients who are sort of doing the post-mortem of their narcissistic relationships, they will literally have a look of disgust on their faces when they are describing the story of their own, how they were love-bombed. I don't like that for them. It was real when it was real. And part of healing is accepting and being compassionate about our histories, even when we look back and say, how did I fall for that? You didn't see the rest of the story. I mean, listen, Jurassic Park seemed like a good idea until the T-Rex and the Velociraptor came to the party. If it was all Stegosauruses, Jurassic Park would have been a really fun place. Now, if anything, the red flag we need to pay attention to is not the compliments and the desire and the cherishing, but rather the hot, cold, on, off, in, out, cherishing you, and then the next day not returning your texts. And then when you say, okay, no, this is not for me, they then say, oh, I'm just afraid of commitment. You're so special. Give me another chance. Nope. The running hot and cold is a sign that the trauma bond is in the house. And if they withdraw, instead of clearly communicating about their fears of commitment, that's its own red flag. It's not limited to just narcissistic people, but that pattern isn't good for anyone. Wanting to be cherished and valued and seen for your beauty or your value, it's not foolish or silly, it's human. Yes, the story may play out badly at the end, but when it was real, it was real. And you made the courageous leap of faith into a new relationship. Healing is all about not shaming yourself and not looking back on the love bombing phase with disdain and contempt for yourself. The only path forward to healing from these relationships is to be able to look at your story and recognize that at that time, not knowing all you were about to learn, you did what you did in good faith. But if you shame that part of yourself, it can make it really difficult to let yourself in some ways off the hook and allow yourself to be taken care of so that the next time you put your hat out in the ring, you are cherishing yourself enough that you won't put up with that hot, cold nonsense that is so classically the narcissistic relationship.